during some of the worst times in your life, you can find the silver lining that can change your world. When my children were 3 and 5, I decided that I was going to ask my ex-husband for a divorce. I have a teaching background, and we had built 2 companies together, but I knew that if I continued on with this marriage, that my children would grow up thinking that that's what marriage looked like, and I did not want them to have that perception. It was the beginning of a 2-year bloodbath. Immediately, my ex-husband fired me from the businesses, so I had no employment. And my prior job was a teacher, but my children were still very young. So I went through a 2-year bloodbath of a divorce. I had a wonderful lawyer. My ex-husband had 5 different lawyers. 4 of them petitioned the judge to get off the case because they didn't want to work with him anymore. My ex-husband was found in contempt 5 times. We went to court so much, and you can only imagine how much money I spent. Thank heaven for my parents stepping in to help. But I sat there as my world was unfolding in the courtroom and realized that I needed to do something more than what I had done in my past. After building a couple businesses with my ex-husband, I knew that going back to teaching would not have been lucrative enough for me to be able to take care of my children, and I truly didn't trust my ex-husband to be there to financially assist in any way. So as I'm watching in the courthouse and being in front of the judge and hearing the attorneys argue back and forth is the time that, for the first time really, that I found my voice. I grew up being very much of an introvert. I was a smart kid, but very quiet. But during my divorce, I found my strength in my voice to fight for myself. And a lot of times during those 2 years, I saw a variety of different talent, I guess you would say, of attorneys from my ex-husband. And I thought to myself that I could do a better job than what some of his lawyers had done. And I also found myself that during my 2-year of a bloodbath of a divorce, I had a number of people in my life that would reach out to me to ask for my advice, to say, hey, I have a sister going through a bad divorce, can you talk to her? So I would be on the phone with strangers trying to give them motivation and tips to get through a bad situation. And that's when I decided that I was going to go to law school to become a family lawyer. It was back in the day when the LSAT was only given twice a year, so I only had a couple weeks to study. Passed the LSAT with a good score, and I had great grades in college, so I got into law school close by where I lived. My kids went to private school, so I'd drive them to school every day. I would go to law school all day long.
How old were your kids then?
My kids were 6 and 8 at the time that I started law school. And fortunately, I had a great neighbor that would pick the kids up from school and get them settled by the time I came home. But I didn't want to be the kind of mom that my kids, for those 3 years that I was in law school, didn't have much of a relationship with it. I didn't want to be studying too much with my having to take care of my kids. So I never opened a book when my kids were awake. I would come home, I would be a mom, do all the mom things, get them ready for bed, homework, what have you. And then when I put them to bed, I studied every night for 3 hours, set my alarm, and went to bed to start the day over. And I did that for 3 years. Passed law school with very good grades and passed the bar exam on the first try, thank heaven. A lot of that, too, I think, was because I knew I had 2 kids that I had to feed, so I had to take school even more seriously than a lot of the people that I was in law school with. And then I started to build my business. Fortunately, I had a good group of people around me from my church, from the school my kids went to, and a lot of people had known this story and all that I had gone through with my ex-husband, that it just kind of became a natural fit to find clients. My goal as a lawyer is to get my clients through a very difficult time in their life as seamlessly as possible. When I first said I wanted to go to law school, my mother actually laughed at me. And I said to her, do you think I'm not smart enough? And she goes, no. She goes, but you have moral and ethics. And going into the legal field, unfortunately, that's a stereotype that a lot of lawyers don't have. And I said, that's one of the reasons why I want to. And my law partner has a similar background where he was in another field and went to law school after a bad divorce. And so because we can sit in the shoes of our clients and know how scary it is of not knowing what your life is going to look like, not knowing, how the co-parenting is going to go, it gives us a different perspective. And I think that helps my clients know that, just because they're in a bad situation right now, they can turn their whole life around and start a whole new life. It's just the dedication and the motivation to do it.
If you can share one piece of advice, not law related, personal success advice to young, any people, any person, what would that be? One piece of advice.
Set a goal and just push every day towards it, because I had zero background in law. I mean, the only thing I knew was what I saw on television. And I was terrified to fail. And when I started law school, I was kind of nervous because a lot of people knew that I was going, and I didn't know how difficult it was going to be. I really didn't know what to expect. And everything in law school is basically based on your final exam. You have a small midterm, but mostly it's based on your final exam. So I was afraid what would happen if I failed. So I was worried, but I knew that I was smart enough that if I just kept pushing forward, and it was literally one day at a time, the routine of this is what I do. I get up, I get my kids ready, I drive them to school, I go to school, I come home, I'm a mom, I put them to bed, and I go back to studying. That routine made it easier to get through.
So just split it into steps.
Yep.
Don't see it as the
focus on one day and keep pushing that day. Don't look at the whole big picture, because I think if I had thought about, oh my gosh, it's 3 years and then 10 weeks to study for the bar exam, it would have been too overwhelming. So I literally I'm going to get through today and be prepared and push forward, and I got through it. And I look back now, and it's been 10 years, or well over 10 years since I went to law school, where I look back now and I'm proud of myself that I was able to get through that and have a successful law practice. And now I'm giving back and helping other people, which I think does make a difference too. That if your heart's in the right place, it does make a difference, because people can see when someone's genuine.
Is any advice you want to give to women in divorce?
That just because you may be in a position where you don't have a lot of experience in a field doesn't mean you can't do it. I could have easily gone back to teaching. I know I would have gotten a teaching job very easily, but I was ready to do something different, and I took the chance to do it, and I think that made a huge difference. I think my teaching degree and my experience in teaching helped me as a lawyer because I'm more organized, and I set up my cases, in a very organized way because I have that background. But you don't have to just fall to what you know. You can learn something new no matter how old you are. My first day of law school, I was 40 years old, and I was super early because I'm always early. And I was sitting there, and the person sitting in front of me was one of my former 5th grade students.
Wow.
And I didn't recognize him because I'm used to what he looked like in 5th grade, but he recognized me right away. And I remember leaving there feeling so old that I was going to school with one of my former students. But it was really a really neat experience.
And you remarried?
Yes, I remarried about 5 years ago. It was about 10 years after my divorce, and I was just very lucky to meet a very genuine, wonderful man. Yes.
Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely, absolutely.